Chris Shandik, CYInterview covering Las Vegas and the world. Today we welcome filmmaker Dawn Mikkelson. Her new documentary, Minnesota Mean, covering roller derby, is now out on various platforms, including Amazon Prime Video and Apple TV+. Dawn, thanks so much for joining us this morning. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so happy to have you here. And also joining us today is CYInterview sponsor, the founder of Epic Financial Strategies, LLC, and the author of the new book, Surviving Success, which you can also find on Amazon, Mr. Rob Gill. Rob, thanks for joining us in CYInterview this morning. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, Don, just to begin, what inspired you to focus on the subject of roller derby in the film Minnesota Mean, which is now out everywhere as of yesterday?
Well, I had a friend join the team, actually, who was 40. And she skated under the name Bernasty. And I thought she was absolutely nuts joining roller derby, particularly at 40. But watched as, I was sure she was going to get herself hurt, which she did. But the community there was amazing. These women are women and non-binary athletes are just so powerful. And also they're a community. And in the truest sense, they took her to doctor's appointments, all the things. So when I saw this community that I fell in love with, but will not be skating myself, I thought the next best thing would be to make a film about it. That's the skill I can bring to the table. So I followed them for a season, and it was amazing. It was so awesome to be a part of that community in some way, to be kind of under the, behind the scenes, and yeah.
So Rob has a youth basketball league called Epic League AAU, Dawn. And the interesting thing about it is that he's all about team building. So Rob, questions for Dawn. There are over 400 roller derby teams in the world, if you can believe it.
Wow, that's amazing.
Right?
Did you grow up in the sport at all? Did you grow up in hockey or anything? Like, what brought you so close to it?
No, I mean, again, it was the friend. I will say that a lot of the players, particularly in Minnesota, have a hockey background. That is a common route to getting to derby. And frankly, they get to do a lot more contact in derby than they ever did in hockey. Women's hockey, at least, when most of these players were growing up, were not allowed to check, or if they were allowed, it was very light. And so, this is the opposite of that. It's just like it's constant checking, right?
Wow.
So, yeah, it's an amazing sport. And actually, speaking of youth sports, my daughter, who is 11, joined the youth league this year. So,
and to be able to put a movie out, like, have you done movies before this? Like, why was the project so passionate?
Yeah. So I've been making films for over 20 years. And actually, my previous film, which premiered 9 months prior to this one, was called Finding Her Beat. And it was about female taiko drummers. So these big Japanese drums that take your whole body to play well. And so I've kind of been on a theme lately of powerful women using their body, taking up space, making big noises. I think it's part of becoming a parent. That's my theory at this point. Yeah. The subject of my other films have been all over the map. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Chris, back to you, brother.
Rob, obviously, in the sport of roller derby, these women work together. When you watch the film, they are all just about a goal and inspiring each other and being there for each other. So tell me about what teamwork is like for you in your life at Epic Financial Strategies, LLC.
Yeah, I think teamwork is, it's practice every day, practice, drill, and rehearse, get really good at the small fundamentals of blocking and tackling, and then get even better at it, and then get even better at it, and really studying the little, for us, if we're going to do sales over the phone, we have to make sure that we understand voice tonality, cadence, congruency, but you can't do anything in sales. I'll bring it from a team building into sales, unless you genuinely, truly want to help the other person. And that only comes with rapport and time, and being able to spend a lot of time with the client, asking the right questions, really understanding what their goals and objectives are, and at the same time, making sure you're circling back to them with a fiduciary responsibility to put the right plan in place. With that, team building means that you got to show up every day. You got to show up in time. You got to show up with enthusiasm. You got to be focused. You got to do the next right thing in front of you as best as you can. And this is where, like, you have head coaches and assistant coaches But even within the team, there's an accountability structure because you always want to make sure that divisiveness isn't coming into the group. And how do you work through some of those challenges, which is really based on the highest level of communication.
Yeah, Rob, no denying that. So, Annie, looking at this, Dawn, I want to ask you more than anything else. We talked about it before that. You said there's 400 roller derby teams in the world. How many are in America?
Ooh, I would say the majority are in America. This sport was reborn in Austin, Texas, I believe. And that was 15 years ago. Derby people are going to be like, what are you saying? They're going to know the details in a way that I don't. But approximately 15 years ago, it was reborn after being dormant since the early 80s. And so actually Minnesota is one of the first teams that were on the charter of the WFTDA, which is the Women's Flat Track Derby Association. So they've been doing this for a while, and it continues to grow. It took a hit, honestly, from COVID, as a primarily volunteer sport. The volunteers were all at home. And so this is actually the first year that the international championships are happening again. So it's an exciting year to watch and see what teams rise to the top now.
So, Rob, these women are they're tough as nails. These women are not apologetic about anything they do. And so I'm going to say this to you, Dawn, I like, mentioning this, like all of them, Rob, they have all pro wrestler names. Like one of them's named Diamond Ruff. I mean, this is just, the question I have for you, Dawn, is that like, how do you think about them making their own personalities and their own names and their own gimmicks? Because it's so pro wrestling.
It is pro wrestling, which is kind of funny because it's all real. And actually there is confusion because in the 70s it wasn't. In the 70s there was some theatricality involved. And now they've held on to those names, and how fun is that? You've got Shiver Me Kimbers, Gertrude Stein, it's like these are great names, and that's one of the wonderful things about Derby, right? Is that it's takes itself seriously, but not too seriously. And so there's that playful element. I mean, my 11-year-old daughter is Chaos on Wheels. That's her Derby name. And actually most of the players, I would say most of the players, if you talk to them, may not know the given names of their friends. They only know each other's Derby names.
Rob, talk about your youth basketball league in reference to this, about teamwork and, working with other teams and going to all these tournaments and being part of the sport environment.
Yeah, so when you have the level of AAU we have, we have some of the better kids in New Jersey here. So they all come from good high school programs, but within those programs, we're getting the best 2 or 3 kids and then bringing them together in a short 4-month window where you can only have practice twice a week instead of 6 times a week. And getting them to get to work together in a short time is a challenge. That's why today, we have an extra practice going on right now because we have a tournament coming up this weekend. It's called the Live Period. So that means in the month of July, these kids get to play in front of college coaches. So the anxiety is up. Everybody's because you want them to play as a team, but then in their private worlds, they're being told that, hey, you only got one shot in front of these coaches. You got to show them what you can do. And coaches don't necessarily care about 40 points versus somebody that's going to dive on the floor and not make faces, be a good passer, be a good player, work on the fundamentals. And that message is conflicting from maybe what their parents are saying to them. So that's always a challenge, especially now with the NIL where these kids get paid. Sometimes these kids are getting paid, at least at my level, 50 to 100 grand. The highest level, these high school kids are making $800 to $1 million. So, those kind of kids, that money goes to the parents, and sometimes it creates a lot of chaos and confusion, a lot of dilution, distortion. So you kind of have to work through that and keep the program above all else. And those are beautiful challenges about teamwork, but that's kind of what we're up against for the next 20 days.
Rob, questions for Dawn? She had a chance to be with a bunch of women on the road working through these things and unity. Any questions you have for her?
Yeah, I mean, what's their practice schedule like? How much money do they make? Like, what does all that look like? Is there good endorsements or anything for the league itself that's going to start uplifting the league and create more eyeballs?
It's an interesting question. I would say that Majority of players do not make anything. They're completely volunteer. I would say there are maybe a couple top players. Rose City in Portland, Oregon is #1 in the world and has been for a while now. And I don't know the details, but I would say that there's a couple of their players that are making some money. And I believe that is off of, relationships with brands, with skating brands. And, with the various, I forget there's a beverage that Red Bull, stuff like that. So, there's that kind of thing. But at this point, I think that it's still all volunteer. And so all of these women have day jobs, anything from being a professor to a waitress or, a construction worker. It's all over the map. And so I think what keeps people playing Derby is the passion. It's the community. It's when you enter a Derby space, the culture at large leaves you behind, and you are in Derby land, and so it's a different world. It's a world where everybody can take up space, and there's no like, oops, excuse me, pardon me, I didn't mean to get in your way. It's just like, no, this is my space. And, so there's a level of confidence that I think a lot of these players are able to feel in that world and also take out into their daily lives. I mean, one of our players, Diamond Ruff, as we mentioned her name earlier, after this season ran for city council and is now a city councilor. Yeah. And she will talk about how Derby was one of those things that helped her develop the skills to enter government, because not only are they playing, but they're also running the league, all volunteer. So it is a different animal that way. I would love to see professional Derby happen. I think that there are players who are playing at that level and, are just amazing.
Yeah.
And because there are now youth leagues that started a few years ago, you've got kids in the pipeline who are leaving straight from, youth Derby and going in and playing at top levels. So it's a matter of time. The audiences are there in Minnesota. I can't speak for the rest of the leagues, but in Minnesota, the audiences are there.
Amazing.
And Don, you're on now, of course, a movie tour now, promoting all of your stuff or whatever. Rob has been on a book tour lately, talking about his new book, Surviving Success, which you can find on Amazon. Rob, talk about Surviving Success with Don.
Yeah, so Surviving Success has been really my life's journey when it comes to not only when I got sober, but then after sobriety. As I began to build businesses, all the trappings of success kind of got a hold of me, and made some beautiful mistakes along the way that allowed me to either, take that next step forward or a major retreat. And that's what the book's about. It talks about the journey of not only how to create wealth, make wealth, but also how to keep your wealth. And at the same time, using I'll use the word trash, some of the trash mistakes that I make and turn into treasure, so that's what the book's about, Surviving Success. And, as you climb the mountaintop and the base camp increases and the oxygen's different and the challenges are different than the lower part of the mountain, it's how do you overcome the challenges and manage situations at each level. And I think my experience is the better you are at managing new situations, the more you can keep climbing.
That makes sense. And also the flexibility, right? To not see those challenges as the end.
Yeah.
And I would say that is similar in filmmaking, particularly documentary, where you enter this world and you have no idea what's going to happen from one minute to the next. We did not, figure these scenes out before we shot them. And so there's always a moment in the edit where you see a scene and the thing that you thought was a mistake turns into one of the best moments of your film.
That's amazing.
And so it's the flexibility of being able to recognize those things, I would imagine.
Dawn, I did not plan this, but I want to let you know, if you're ever looking for a great story of a man who went from nothing to everything and dealt with challenges in between that everything, this guy right down here, he's related to Danny Hurley, who just won a national championship for UConn. He's got a story beyond stories. You have no idea. So just to let you know, we'll get over a link of the book, of Rob's book, over to you so you can read it as well. But I'm telling you, he's got an amazing story. I'm just telling you, like, look up Rob Gill after your interviews are done today. So let me ask you, from a business perspective, okay, which I think is kind of amazing. Obviously, Hollywood is continuing to change and distribution. How are you able to get your film on both Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV Plus, and all these places? It's become a real synergy now to make sure it's everywhere. How did you accomplish that?
I mean, part of it's having done this for a while and knowing which doors to knock on, which folks to talk to. I will say that distribution of documentaries right now is in I don't want to say a dark place, because that sounds, a little bit heavier than I want to go, but it's shifting. The major streaming platforms like Netflix are not purchasing things to become a Netflix original anymore. They're making it themselves. And so all the independent filmmakers who prior to that were selling their films to Netflix are not getting those deals anymore. And so we are in a stage in independent film where we're re-envisioning, or maybe returning to our roots of what the business model is. And the business model is really about finding your audience. And, in my case, my audience are going to be clearly Derby, but also, people who like a good sports story, who like who love that kind of energy. And so we're promoting ourselves. We're, getting out there in a very grassroots way. And then, distributors will see that and see that you have your own audience. You're coming to the table with something they can work with. And so that's kind of what happened with this film is, they recognized our audience, they recognized the film, and here we are. So,
but to get it into multiple top 10 streaming platform places and not just be, put in one corner on one platform, I think is quite impressive. That's what I'm saying to you.
I see. No, I appreciate that. I do think that's strategy as well, though. It's all about strategy, because like people who are looking at Amazon are not looking at Apple. So you have to get on all those places because the audiences are different on every platform. So, yeah.
Rob, questions?
Yeah, no, I no questions. Acknowledgement of the journey and success, and yeah, it's just like social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. They're all different audiences, so it must be the same thing. That's what I just learned here when it comes to what you're doing with the live stream, right? So, or streaming, not live stream. Sorry, and yeah, so
No problem.
Amazing. But I'm just, Chris, thankful for the opportunity. Dawn, I wish you continued success, of course.
Thank you.
Roller derby is, it's, I find it interesting that sometimes these women go to work the next day with black eyes, I'm sure, and some scratches on their face, and what that would be like, and, looking forward to seeing how this plays out.
Cool.
Yeah. Rob, if you haven't had a chance to watch it, I sent you along the link, of course. You can watch it. It's in your email. Dawn, final question. I was gonna put this together. What do you think it is for these women? Again, as you say, most of them are not getting compensated. Like, what would get someone to do this, put their body on the line, possibly get injured with no financial benefit, in the short term, at least? Maybe in the long term, there'll be something. But you get what I mean? Like, what do you think motivates them?
It's the love of the sport, hands down. I think that there is a point when people reach their, late 30s, early 40s, that if they're playing on a high level, they start going, maybe it's time to coach. But beyond that, it's a love of the sport. And I can't tell you how many broken ankles there are in this sport. And, and actually injuries are a way of bonding. I had a very minor injury, completely unrelated to Derby, during the final scenes of this film. And of course, it's not in the film, but behind the scenes, I'd hurt myself. And I had this, list of texts from the team. I was on a group text, and they were all like, "Pictures, show us pictures." Like, we're bonding over our injuries. And I think that women are just as capable of doing that than men. So that's what we're doing.
Filmmaker Dawn Mikkelson, her new documentary film Minnesota Mean is now out on platforms including Amazon Prime Video and Apple TV Plus. You can see it now. Look for it, Minnesota Mean. And of course, CYInterview sponsor, the founder of Epic Financial Strategies LLC, Mr. Rob Gill, is also the author of the new book Surviving Success, and of course, Epic Elite AAU Basketball League, Youth Basketball League. Thank you both for being on CYInterview today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.